Today we get to travel to Caesarea Philippi, and the folks up above are going to show some slides to you of some of the remains of Caesarea and Philippi. Those of us who have been to Israel have experienced these remains. Caesarea Philippi is no longer a city, but it's just a bunch of remains. And as I was there and as I understood about it, it felt like to me, Caesarea felt like a shopping mall for temples and gods. You could go to whatever temple you wanted to go and offer whatever offering you wanted to whatever god you wanted to offer. Well, one of the things that occurred at Caesarea Philippi was that Herod the Great wanted to honor his dad, and so built a real nice temple at Caesarea Philippi to his dad. Emperors, they don't have self-esteem problems, or at least it appears they don't have self-esteem problems. They thought of themselves and were thought of as divine. You got to get that to understand the reading that we have from the gospel. So isn't it interesting that the mall of gods, including the god to the emperor, is where Jesus has quite the little conversation about who he is and what it means to follow him. Who do people say that I am? Jesus asks his disciples. In light of all of these temples, in light of all of these gods, who do you say I am? Well, some say Elijah, some say you're John the Baptist raised from the dead. Peter, who do you say I am? Peter says you are the Christ. That is, you are the Messiah. Now, it's really hard to know whether Jesus really likes that response. He certainly doesn't say, congratulations, Peter, you finally got it. In fact, he starts now a teaching session, which makes me wonder if indeed Jesus thought Peter hadn't yet gotten it. And Mark tells us that he began to teach the disciples that the Son of Man, the Son of humanity, must undergo great suffering. Mark's words are interesting. He began to teach. This isn't going to be a one-time lesson. The disciples, we aren't going to catch on to this stuff very easily. In Mark, this is one of the 3 teachings about the upcoming death and passion of Jesus. You know, sometimes it takes a long time before we ever get the bigger stuff. And what I'm about ready to proclaim to you, one of the reasons you got to just keep coming back is because we will not get what I'm about ready to proclaim and what Jesus is proclaiming. It's interesting to note that in Jesus' response to Peter, he does not call himself, as Peter calls Jesus, the Christ. He rather calls himself the Son of humanity, a figure who shows up in the book of Daniel, preparing the way for the end. But literally the word Son of humanity, as it says in the text, Son of Man, means a child of the human race. Jesus doesn't call himself the Christ. Let's face it, that term probably had huge political expectations attached to it. The Christ, you see, was going to make Israel strong and great again. The Christ would use power to defeat the enemies of Israel, establishing it as a country of renown and military might and economic prosperity. But this is not how Jesus understands his life. And he must make that clear. The Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed. And we are told in Mark that he said all of this quite openly. To this point, he's been telling folks in Mark, keep a secret. Don't let everybody know who I am. Don't report on what I'm doing. Now he's going public. And what is he going public on? The fact that he must die and must suffer. And Peter says, oh no. This can't happen to you. That is not what we signed up for. And I truly get Peter, because I would have said the same thing. Life isn't supposed to work out this way. Life is supposed to be about victory, not what appears to be failure. Life is supposed to be about life, not death, not suffering. But Jesus obviously thinks otherwise. He calls Peter Satan for thinking as he does. He says, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are focusing not on the ways of God, but on the ways of human beings. Get out of my way, Peter. I'm heading toward the cross." Now, on the one hand, it seems to me that Jesus is overreacting here. He's so focused on his mission that he can't grasp that others are not ready for this message about pain. You know how this works. I know you do. You become so focused. You are so focused that you don't want anybody to get in the way of your focus. You know where you're going, and nobody's going to stop you. And I suspect that's true for Jesus here, but I also think that Jesus truly has a different view of life than the one most of us operate with, the one that runs our culture, the one that runs most nations and cultures. And that different view is seen in what he teaches today. Any who want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For those who want to save their lives, they're going to lose them. And what good would it be for you if you gained everything you could buy and yet lose who you really are? What would it profit you to gain the whole world and not have a you? You know, sometimes I think about all these famous people in life, you know, the entertainers, the sports stars, the politicians, the Putins, the Caesars of the world. They seek fame, they seek fortune, they seek power, and often they get all of those things, or at least part of them, but so frequently they lose themselves. Quite often they die early. They live lives estranged from others. Some of you who are old like me might remember Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes, one of the great American business magnates, one of the most influential and richest people of his time. He had it all. He had it all. But truthfully, he had nothing. He died a recluse. He had almost no one around him when he died, except those who were interested in his money. You know, the Caesars of the world are often very tragic human beings. They get their fancy houses all over the country, their pools, their art, their jewels, and sometimes what they want most, their fame and their power. And then they live such disconnected lives, lives that are simply about them. History is replete with stories of one narcissistic Caesar after another. The dictators of the world have been and almost always are narcissists. And Jesus says, if you want real life, if you want life that matters, you're going to have to get over yourself. If you want a God-shaped life, a life that follows Jesus, you must lay down your life. By the way, these words are spoken not simply to followers, but to leaders. Jesus, as he is shaping his disciples, is shaping leaders. If you don't want to be like Caesar, you remember him, the guy who made all that big, nice temple. If you don't want to be like Caesar, if you want to lead in a healthy way, in a way that brings true life, you have to let go of yourself. If you don't, your leadership will simply be about you, not the message you have to proclaim, and not the mission that is yours. I've probably not been overly popular with intern pastors, and I've supervised many of them, when I have told them if they want to lead in the church, they're sometimes going to have to set up chairs and do dishes and turn off lights. They are not too good, too well educated for that kind of stuff. In fact, Jesus says if you want to be a leader like him, you're going to wash people's feet. You're going to lead. You're going to have to swallow your pride sometimes. Or probably more accurately, if you're going to lead in a Jesus kind of way, you're going to have to not think of yourself as different from anybody else. A couple weeks from now, you're going to hear a marvelous David Crowder song in which the vocalists will sing, "Lay down your burdens." And you know what? One of the biggest burdens we have in our lives is ourselves, which is why Peter has such a hard time going with Jesus where he's going. It's why most of us have a hard time following Jesus. Honestly, whether we look proud and narcissistic or whether we kind of try that humility play, whatever it might be, we have a hard time getting over ourselves. And almost every ounce of our being and every message that the culture gives us is about protecting ourselves, saving ourselves, defending ourselves. It's almost as if we are wired not to lay down ourselves. So, what enables us to do so? What enables us to lay down our lives? What enables us to get over ourselves? And I think that is what the first and second readings for today are addressing. This guy named Abraham and a woman named Sarah, they're the focus. And God, we are told, makes a promise to these folks, even when they're old and about to die. God says, "I will make you exceedingly numerous. You shall be an ancestor of a multitude of nations. I'm going to do the impossible. That's my promise to you. I'm going to give you a son, and then you're going to have many relatives." Paul says that Abraham trusted this promise. He left his homeland, living in light of the promise. And God, according to Paul, reckoned this trust as righteousness. Abraham lived out what God wanted most: faith, trust. How do you let go of yourself? It's the hardest question I'll ever ask you. How do you let go of yourself? How is it possible to lay down your life? Realize that you live in light of a promise. You live in light of the promise of a secure self. You have worth. You have security. You are a child of God. When you were baptized into worth and love and purpose and meaning. You became a child of the promise. Your life is lived in light of that giant promise. Now, admittedly, it is a promise, not a guarantee. There are all kinds of forces that will try to take that promise away from you, including ones that will come from within you as well as ones that will come from outside of you. But trust the promise. Live by faith. So, lay down your burdens. Lay down yourself. It is not all about you. It doesn't need to be. You are a child of the promise. Take up your cross and follow Jesus. Those who lose their lives will find them. Amen.